The forest didn't feel like France. To the men of the 77th Division, huddled in a steep, muddy ravine, it felt like the mouth of hell. The Argonne Forest in October 1918 was a tangled, soggy nightmare. Ancient trees formed a canopy so thick it cast the world below in a perpetual, gloomy twilight, even at noon. The air was cold, biting, and heavy with the smell of damp earth, rotting leaves, and the coppery tang of blood. This was the Charlevoix Ravine, and for over 500 men from New York City, it had become a trap. They were called the Lost Battalion, but they weren't really lost. Their commander, Major Charles Whittlesey, a quiet, bespectacled lawyer in civilian life, knew exactly where they were. The problem was, so did the Germans. They were surrounded, cut off from the rest of the American forces by a tightening noose of German machine guns, snipers, and artillery. For 5 days, the echoes of gunfire and the desperate shouts of men had been the only music. Rain fell incessantly, turning their shallow foxholes into cold, watery graves. Food was gone. Ammunition was so low that men were ordered not to fire unless they saw the whites of an enemy's eyes. The wounded lay on the muddy slopes, their moans a constant, heartbreaking chorus. Hope was becoming as scarce as a warm, dry pair of socks. Major Whittlesey stood in a command post that was little more than a scooped-out hole in the earth, studying a rain-smeared map by the dim light. His second-in-command, Captain George McMurtry, a former Rough Rider with Teddy Roosevelt, leaned against the muddy wall, his face etched with exhaustion. "They're closing in, Charles," McMurtry said, his voice a low rasp. "The runners we sent out, not one has made it." Whittlesey didn't need to be reminded. They had sent out 8 men, brave souls who had tried to slip through the German lines to tell headquarters their position in the dire situation. 8 men. None had returned. They were either lying dead in the leaf litter or captured. The Germans were watching every trail, every creek bed. Just then, a young soldier scrambled down into the hole, his uniform caked in mud, his breathing ragged. "Sir, another attack on the west slope. They're using flamethrowers." Whittlesey's jaw tightened. Flamethrowers, the most terrifying weapon in this close-quarters hellscape. He looked at the handful of men around him, clerks, mechanics, shopkeepers from the bustling streets of New York, now transformed into grim-faced soldiers fighting for their lives in a foreign wood. "We have to hold," Whittlesey said, his voice quiet but firm. "We have to let them know we're still here. We need artillery. Our own guns are shelling us because they think this position is lost. We need to tell them to stop and then to shell the Germans." "But how?" McMurtry gestured vaguely towards the impenetrable wall of trees beyond their perimeter. "Sending another man out there is a death sentence. The Boche have us locked down tight." A silence fell between them, broken only by the distant rattle of a machine gun and the ever-present crump of artillery shells. It was in that heavy silence that a figure approached the command post. He moved differently than the other men. There was a quiet grace to his steps, a way of placing his feet that made almost no sound, even on the wet, twig-strewn ground. He was of medium height, with a calm, composed face that seemed strangely untouched by the panic around him. His eyes, dark and intelligent, took in everything. This was Private Charles Whittlesey's secret weapon. This was Private Charlie L. Whittlesey's runner. His name was Charles, but everyone called him Charlie. He was just a kid, really, but he wasn't from New York. He was from the green, rolling hills of Oklahoma, and he was Cherokee. "Major," Charlie said, his voice steady. "I heard about the runners." Whittlesey looked at the young man. He'd noticed him before, of course. In a unit full of loud, fast-talking city boys, Charlie was an island of calm. He was a crack shot, and he had an uncanny ability to move through the woods like a ghost. "We can't get a message through, son," McMurtry said, a note of defeat in his voice. "The Germans are everywhere." Charlie's gaze didn't waver. He looked from McMurtry to the major. "Sir," he said, his words simple and direct. "Let me try." Whittlesey studied him. He saw the resolve in the young man's eyes. He remembered the reports of his woodcraft. But this wasn't a hunting trip in Oklahoma. This was the Argonne, a forest teeming with veteran German soldiers who knew the land. "It's suicide, Private," Whittlesey said softly. "With all due respect, sir," Charlie replied. "Staying here is suicide for all of us. I can move quiet. I can read the land. I don't need a trail." I can find a way. He said it not with bravado, but with a simple, unshakable confidence. It was the confidence of a people who had lived with the land for centuries, who understood its language. In that moment, huddled in a muddy hole in France, Major Whittlesey, the Harvard-educated lawyer, was placing the fate of over 500 men on the ancient, inherited skills of a Cherokee boy. He made his decision. "All right, Charlie," Whittlesey said, his voice thick with emotion. He pulled out a damp, folded piece of paper from his tunic. The message, their last hope. It contained their coordinates, their strength, the fact that they were being shelled by their own artillery, and a plea for a barrage to cover a rescue. "You get this to headquarters. You tell them where we are. You tell them we are hanging on by our fingernails." Charlie took the message, folded it again, and tucked it deep into an inside pocket of his tunic, close to his heart. He nodded. "I'll get it through, sir." As he turned to leave, McMurtry grabbed his arm. "Good luck, kid." He pressed a single, precious chocolate bar into Charlie's hand. "For the road." Charlie gave a small, almost shy smile. Then, without another word, he melted into the twilight of the forest, disappearing into the shadows and trees as if he had never been there at all. The fate of the lost battalion was now in his hands, and the long, lonely, and deadly journey had begun. The moment Charlie left the perimeter, the world changed. The desperate, claustrophobic energy of the pocket faded, replaced by a vast, watchful silence. It was a different kind of pressure. In the ravine, death was loud, communal, a shared storm you faced with your brothers. Out here, it would be a silent, personal thing. A single twig snap, a misplaced breath, and it would all be over. He didn't run. Running was for open fields and panic. Here, movement was a language, and he spoke it fluently. He became a part of the forest, a shadow drifting between the gnarled trunks of ancient oaks and beeches. His feet, clad in worn leather boots, didn't step on the ground so much as they read it. He felt for the soft moss, avoided the brittle branches, placed his weight with the patience of a falling leaf. His mind was a map, not of drawn lines, but of sensory information. The way the mist curled around a particular cluster of ferns told him of a hidden dip in the land. The alarm call of a jaybird 100 yards to his left painted a clear picture of a German patrol moving on a parallel path. He used the land's own sounds as his cover, moving only when the wind rustled the highest leaves, his footsteps masked by nature's own orchestra. For the first hour, it was a game of cat and mouse with the periphery of the German encirclement. He could hear them, the guttural tones of their language, the occasional laugh, the metallic clink of a canteen. They were confident, relaxed. They believed the Americans in the pocket were finished, a problem that would solve itself with time and starvation. Charlie moved through their lines not like a soldier, but like a hunter stalking prey he had no intention of engaging. He flattened himself against a fallen log as two German soldiers, their gray-green uniforms almost blending with the damp wood, passed within 10 feet of him, complaining about the cold and the mud. He held his breath, his heart a steady, slow drum in his chest. They never looked his way. To them, he was just another shadow. But the further he got from the pocket, the more dangerous the forest became. This was no man's land, a shattered landscape churned by millions of artillery shells. The trees were skeletal, splintered things. The earth was a pockmarked bog of shell holes filled with oily, stagnant water. The cozy, living forest was gone, replaced by a grotesque graveyard of wood and earth. Here, his woodcraft was less useful. The land had no natural rhythm left to read. It was here that he saw them. Not a patrol, but a machine gun nest, cleverly positioned on a slight rise to cover a small, exposed valley, the most logical route for any runner trying to get through. His heart sank. This was why the others had failed. They had tried the logical routes. They had followed the paths of least resistance, right into the enemy's killing zones. He crouched in the muck at the edge of the shattered tree line, studying the position. Two men, one alert, scanning the valley through binoculars, the other leaning against the ammunition box, looking bored. A deadly, chattering Maxim gun pointed directly down the path he was supposed to take. For a long, tense minute, he considered his options. Go around. The valley was flanked by steep, bare slopes. He'd be silhouetted against the skyline for sure. Wait for nightfall. He could, but every hour he waited, men were dying back in the ravine. Major Whittlesey was counting on him. Then he saw it. A tiny, almost invisible movement in the ruined earth just below the machine gun nest. A fox, a scrawny, red vixen, picking her way delicately through the debris, heading for a hole under a tangled root ball just to the left of the German position. An idea, wild and desperate, sparked in his mind. Slowly, carefully, he began to move. Not around the nest, but in a wide, painstaking arc that took him behind it. He used the shell craters as his cover, slithering through the mud and stagnant water like a snake, his uniform becoming a uniform cake of grime. The stench was overwhelming, rot, cordite, and something worse. It took him nearly an hour to cover a few hundred yards. Finally, he was in position, upslope and behind the German nest. He could hear them talking now, their voices clear in the damp air. He found what he needed, a fist-sized chunk of shrapnel, heavy and jagged. He looked across the small valley to a thicket of splintered trees directly opposite the German position. He took a deep breath, prayed the vixen was still home, and threw the chunk of metal with all his strength. It wasn't a throw at the Germans. It was a throw at the thicket across the way. The metal chunk crashed through the dead branches with a sound like a skeleton falling down a staircase. The effect was instantaneous. The alert German gunner spun around, binoculars snapping to his eyes. The bored one grabbed the machine gun, swiveling it towards the source of the noise. Was War Das? One of them hissed. What was that? In that precious 3-second window, as both Germans stared intently across the valley, Charlie made his move. He didn't run. He flowed. He rose from the muck and, in a low, silent crouch, sprinted the 20 yards to the back of their position, diving into the fox's den he had seen from afar. It was a tight squeeze, the earth smelling of animal and damp soil, but it was cover. He held his breath, listening. The Germans, after a tense minute of scanning the opposite tree line, relaxed. Nichts, Nerderwald. Nothing, just the forest. The bored one laughed, making a comment about nervous recruits and jumping at shadows. They had no idea that the very shadow they had dismissed had just slipped through their grasp, a ghost in the machine of their perfect encirclement. Charlie waited another 10 minutes, his body cramping in the tight space, before he began the slow, careful process of extricating himself. He had passed the first major hurdle, but the Argonne had many more in store, and the sun was beginning to set, painting the dead forest in shades of blood and bronze. The brief, bruised twilight of the Argonne was fading fast, surrendering to a deep, impenetrable blackness. For most soldiers, night in the forest was a time of heightened terror. Sounds were magnified, shadows moved, and the imagination conjured enemies in every stump. For Charlie, it was a cloak. He moved now with a different kind of purpose. The moon, a thin sliver, offered little light, and that was his ally. His world narrowed to the few feet of ground he could feel with his hands and feet. He was no longer just a man moving through the woods. He was a creature of the night, his senses stretched to their limits. The chocolate bar from Captain McMurtry was long gone, a forgotten sweetness in a world of decay. His stomach growled, a hollow echo of the life he was fighting for. He thought of the men in the pocket, their own hunger a gnawing constant. He thought of Major Whittlesey's quiet, desperate trust. He pushed the thoughts away. Sentimentality was a luxury he couldn't afford. Right now, he needed to be as sharp and as cold as the bayonet strapped to his pack. He was navigating by an internal compass, guided by the subtle flow of the land and the memory of the stars he'd glimpsed before the clouds swallowed them. He knew he had to be getting close to the American lines. The character of the destruction around him was changing. The shell holes were fresher, the splintered trees oozing sap instead of standing as dry rot. The air carried a different scent, less of stagnant death, more of recent cordite and spent energy. Hope, a dangerous and fragile thing, began to flutter in his chest. And that's when he heard it. It wasn't the sound of the forest. It was the sound of industry. A low, rhythmic chug-chug-chug and the faint, acrid smell of coal smoke. He froze, melting against the trunk of a massive oak tree, his mind racing. What was a train doing here? There were no rails in this part of the Argonne. Cautiously, he crept forward, using the terrain to mask his approach. The land dipped down into a small, hidden valley he hadn't seen on any map. And there, nestled within it, was the source of the sound. It wasn't a train. It was a generator, powering a bank of electric lights that illuminated a scene that made his blood run cold. A German command post. Not just a few soldiers in a hole, but a proper, semi-permanent installation. He saw officers in clean uniforms moving between tents, field telephones with wires snaking off into the darkness. And most chilling of all, a large radio transmitter, its antenna strung between two trees. This was a nerve center. This was how they were coordinating the siege of the Lost Battalion. His original mission, to get the message to American lines, was now complicated by a terrifying new reality. This command post was the reason the Germans knew every move the 77th Division tried to make. They were listening. They were predicting. They were a brain directing the muscle that was crushing his friends. He couldn't just go around it. He had to do something. But what? One man with a rifle against a small company of enemy soldiers? It was suicide. He lay in the wet leaves, watching, thinking. The lights from the camp created a pool of visibility, but beyond that, the forest was a wall of black. He noticed the patterns. Sentries walked a predictable route. The men near the generator and radio tent were technicians, less alert than the frontline troops he'd encountered earlier. An idea began to form, born of desperation and a deep, innate understanding of chaos. He wouldn't attack the men. He would attack their machines. He spent another hour observing, memorizing the sentry routes, timing the gaps. The generator was his target. It was the heart of this little outpost. Kill the generator, and you kill the lights and the radio. You create confusion, darkness, his two greatest allies. He circled the camp at a distance, finding a position directly upwind of the generator. The machine was chugging away, a noisy, smelly beast guarded by a single, bored-looking soldier who was more interested in staying warm near its radiating heat than in watching the woods. From his pack, Charlie carefully took out his one and only grenade. It felt heavy and final in his hand. This was a point of no return. The explosion would pinpoint his location for every German within a mile. He took a deep breath. This wasn't just about delivering a message anymore. This was about giving the Lost Battalion a fighting chance. He pulled the pin. He didn't throw it immediately. He counted. 1,000, 2, 1,000. He waited for the sentry to turn his back, to take a few steps away to light a cigarette. 3, 1,000. With a smooth, underhand motion, he lobbed the grenade. It wasn't a throw for distance, but for accuracy. It sailed in a high, silent arc, disappearing into the darkness above the generator. He didn't wait to see it land. The moment it left his hand, he was moving, scrambling back and away from his position, putting as much distance as he could between himself and the coming storm. The explosion was deafening. A brilliant orange flower bloomed in the night, followed by a satisfying crump of tearing metal and the immediate, dying cough of the generator. The electric lights flickered and died, plunging the command post into sudden, profound darkness. Shouts of alarm and confusion erupted in German, panicked and disoriented. From his new hiding place further away, Charlie allowed himself a grim smile. In the chaos, he heard the officers barking orders, soldiers stumbling in the dark, the frantic crank of a hand-powered radio trying to get a signal out. He had thrown a rock into their pond. Now, while the ripples of confusion spread, he had to move. The path to the American lines might just be clear for a brief, precious window. Slipping away from the chaos he had created, Charlie ran. Not the careful, silent stalk of before, but a full, desperate sprint. He was a shadow once more, but now a shadow fueled by a spark of hope he had forged himself. The night, once his cloak, was now his shield, and he vanished into its embrace, leaving behind a German command post plunged into helpless, shouting darkness. The explosion was a starting pistol shot in the silent night. Now, the hunt was truly on. Charlie could feel it in the air, a sudden, electric tension that replaced the previous German confidence. Sirens wailed in the distance, not from the command post he'd just crippled, but from other positions, a chain reaction of alarm. Searchlights, powered from other generators, stabbed into the sky, their beams crisscrossing the undergrowth like frantic, luminous fingers trying to grasp a ghost. He ran. He ran until his lungs burned and his legs felt like lead. He could no longer afford the luxury of stealth. Speed was his only ally now. The Germans knew someone was out here, a phantom who had struck at their heart. They would be sealing every possible escape route. The terrain began to change again, sloping downwards. The sound of water, faint at first, grew steadily louder until it became a low, persistent roar. He pushed through a final thicket of brambles and stopped dead in his tracks. The electric lights flickered and died, plunging the command post into sudden, profound darkness. Shouts of alarm and confusion erupted in German, panicked and disoriented. From his new hiding place further away, Charlie allowed himself a grim smile. In the chaos, he heard the officers barking orders, soldiers stumbling in the dark, the frantic crank of a hand-powered radio trying to get a signal out. He had thrown a rock into their pond. Now, while the ripples of confusion spread, he had to move. The path to the American lines might just be clear for a brief, precious window. Slipping away from the chaos he had created, Charlie ran. Not the careful, silent stalk of before, but a full, desperate sprint. He was a shadow once more, but now a shadow fueled by a spark of hope he had forged himself. The night, once his cloak, was now his shield, and he vanished into its embrace, leaving behind a German command post plunged into helpless, shouting darkness. The explosion was a starting pistol shot in the silent night. Now, the hunt was truly on. Charlie could feel it in the air, a sudden, electric tension that replaced the previous German confidence. Sirens wailed in the distance, not from the command post he'd just crippled, but from other positions, a chain reaction of alarm. Searchlights, powered from other generators, stabbed into the sky, their beams crisscrossing the undergrowth like frantic, luminous fingers trying to grasp a ghost. He ran. He ran until his lungs burned and his legs felt like lead. He could no longer afford the luxury of stealth. Speed was his only ally now. The Germans knew someone was out here, a phantom who had struck at their heart. They would be sealing every possible escape route. The terrain began to change again, sloping downwards. The sound of water, faint at first, grew steadily louder until it became a low, persistent roar. He pushed through a final thicket of brambles and stopped dead in his tracks. A river. It wasn't wide, maybe 30 or 40 feet across, but it moved with a powerful, churning current, swollen by the autumn rains. The water was the color of dark coffee, and it frothed angrily around jagged rocks. On the other side, the land rose sharply into a steep, muddy bank. And on the far side, he could see the familiar, ragged edges of American foxholes. He was so close. He could see the silhouettes of doughboy helmets, the glint of a bayonet and the occasional flare of a distant star shell. The American lines. Safety. The end of his mission. But the river was a mode of death. A single, rickety wooden bridge, little more than a few planks, spanned the torrent. And it was guarded. A German machine gun nest was dug in on his side of the river, covering the bridge with a perfect field of fire. 2 soldiers manned the gun, their post reinforced with sandbags. They were on high alert now, their heads on a swivel, scanning the tree line. They knew their command post had been hit, and they knew the culprit would be trying to get across. Charlie's heart sank into the mud at his feet. This was it. This was the final, impossible barrier. He could try to swim, but the current would sweep him away and dash him on the rocks before he was halfway across. He could try to go upstream or down, but that would take hours he didn't have, and the Germans would be swarming this entire area soon. He was trapped. The message, tucked safely against his heart, felt like a lead weight. He had come so far, through so much, only to be stopped at the very finish line. He slumped behind a fallen log, the exhaustion and despair finally washing over him. The image of Major Whittlesey's grim face, of the wounded men in the ravine, flashed in his mind. He had failed them. Just then, the sky to the east began to lighten. A pale, gray wash diluted the blackness of night. Dawn was coming. With dawn, he would be completely exposed. As the light grew, he noticed something he hadn't seen before. A little way downstream from the bridge, the river widened slightly, and the current seemed to slow. And there, just beneath the surface, was a dark, sinuous line of rocks, like the backbone of some great river serpent. It wasn't a bridge, but it was a path, a treacherous, slippery path, but a path nonetheless. A ford. It was his only chance. He began to crawl, slithering on his belly through the mud and reeds along the riverbank, keeping low to avoid the sight line of the machine gun nest. The two Germans were still focused on the bridge and the tree line directly in front of it, never thinking to look for a threat coming from the river itself. Finally, he reached the ford. The water was icy cold as he slipped his first boot into it, the shock stealing his breath. He paused, listening. The roar of the river was his cover, but it was also a deadly distraction. One misstep, and he would be gone. He stepped onto the first submerged rock. It was slimy and unstable. His arms windmilled for a terrifying second before he found his balance. He took another step, then another, moving with the slow, deliberate grace of a tightrope walker. The water tugged at his legs, trying to pluck him from his precarious perch. It was waist-deep now, the cold seeping into his bones, sapping his strength. He was halfway across when he heard a shout from the bank. One of the German machine gunners had finally turned his head. He was pointing, yelling to his companion. They had seen him. Time seemed to slow down. Charlie saw the second German swing the machine gun towards the river. He saw the muzzle flash, a bright, wicked wink in the dawn light. But he didn't hear the bullets. Instead, he heard a different sound, a sharp, crack thump from the American side of the river. An American sniper had seen the commotion. The German gunner who had spotted Charlie jerked backwards and slumped over his weapon. The other soldier, startled, ducked behind the sandbags. It was the distraction Charlie needed. Abandoning all caution, he leaped from the rock he was on to the next, slipping, stumbling, fighting the current with every ounce of his strength. Bullets from the second German now did rip into the water around him, sending up geysers of spray. He felt a searing pain in his calf, a graze, or a hit. He didn't know. He just knew he had to keep moving. Another American rifle shot rang out, keeping the German's head down. With a final, desperate lunge, Charlie threw himself forward, his hands clawing at the muddy American bank. Strong hands reached down, grabbing the straps of his pack, his uniform, hauling him out of the churning, icy water like a half-drowned dog. He collapsed, gasping and shivering, onto solid ground. He was surrounded by grimy, wide-eyed American soldiers. "A runner," someone shouted. He came from the other side. An officer pushed his way through the crowd, kneeling beside him. "Son, can you hear me? Where did you come from?" Charlie, his body racked with shivers, his teeth chattering, fumbled with numb, trembling fingers at the buttons of his tunic. The fabric was soaked, the paper a pulpy, fragile mess. But it was still there. With the last of his strength, he pressed the sodden, precious message into the officer's hand. The lost battalion," he choked out, his voice a raw whisper. "Major Whittlesey, Charlevoix Ravine. For the love of God, stop the artillery, and tell them, we're still there." His vision tunneled, the faces of the soldiers blurring into a haze of gray and green. The roar of the river faded, replaced by a ringing in his ears. He had done it. He had delivered the message. Then, the world went black. Charlie's world was a swirl of muffled sounds and distant pain. He drifted in a gray, formless space, the bone-deep cold of the river still clinging to him. He was aware of being moved, of rough hands being surprisingly gentle, of a blanket's scratchy wool against his cheek. The sharp, clean smell of antiseptic cut through the pervasive stench of mud and decay. He fought his way back to consciousness, his eyelids fluttering open. He was in a medical tent. A lantern hung from the central pole, casting a warm, golden light on cots filled with wounded men. A medic with a tired but kind face was wrapping a clean bandage around his calf, where a German bullet had gouged a furrow in his flesh. "Welcome back, soldier," the medic said softly. "You gave us quite a scare. You've been out for a few hours." Hours. The word was a punch to his gut. He tried to sit up, a jolt of panic overriding his exhaustion. "The message," he croaked, his throat raw. "Major Whittlesey." A familiar voice cut through the tense, hushed atmosphere. "At ease, Private." The message was delivered. Standing at the foot of his cot was the officer who had pulled him from the riverbank. He looked different now, cleaner, his face etched with a new, fierce energy. "I'm Captain Johnson," the man said, a hint of awe in his voice. "That paper you brought, it's a miracle it was legible. But we read it. We know where they are. We know what they're facing." A wave of relief, so powerful it felt like a physical force washed over Charlie. He sank back onto the cot, his body going limp. He had done it. He had really done it. But the captain wasn't finished. "The problem, son," is that the Germans have been jamming our field phone lines all through this sector. We can't get a clear signal back to division artillery to call off the friendly fire and redirect it. They're still shelling your friends by mistake." The relief curdled into a fresh, cold dread. He had gotten the message here, but it wasn't enough. It had to get further. There's a command post," Charlie whispered, forcing the words out. "Behind their lines. I found it. I took out their generator, but they have a big radio. They're the ones coordinating everything. They were jamming you." Captain Johnson's eyes widened. This was new, critical intelligence. "Can you lead us to it?" "On a map." They brought him a map, and with a trembling finger, Charlie pointed to the hidden valley, describing the generator, the tents, the radio antenna. The captain nodded, barking orders to his men. A raid was being planned, an attack to take out that nerve center for good. But that would take time. Time the Lost Battalion didn't have. Just then, a young communications officer, his face smudged with dirt, rushed into the tent. "Sir, we've got a partial line open to a forward observation post. The jamming is intermittent. We might be able to get a short message through, but the signal is weak and we can't guarantee it will hold." Captain Johnson looked from the comms officer to Charlie, a desperate idea forming in his mind. The Germans were listening. They spoke English. They would be monitoring every crackle of the American radios, waiting to pounce on any order about the Lost Battalion. "They'll be listening for our codes, for our coordinates," the captain muttered. "They'll hear anything we say in English and adjust their own artillery to counter it." His eyes settled on Charlie, on his calm, determined face. An idea, born of sheer, brilliant desperation, took hold. "Private," the captain said, his voice low and intense. "You said you were Cherokee, right?" Charlie nodded, confused. "Do you speak it?" "Fluently." "Yes, sir," Charlie said. "It was my first language." A fierce, hopeful smile spread across Captain Johnson's face. "Then the Boche can listen all they want." He turned to the communications officer. "Get him on the line. To the observation post." Now, minutes later, Charlie was sitting on an upturned ammunition crate, a heavy field telephone headset pressed to his ear. The line hissed and popped with static, the sound of German jamming like a venomous snake in the wires. Somewhere in the distance, he could hear a faint, tinny voice. "Post 7, do you read?" "Over." He looked at Captain Johnson, who gave him a firm, encouraging nod. Charlie took a deep breath. He wasn't a soldier in a medical tent anymore. He was a boy back in Oklahoma, hearing the soft, flowing words of his grandparents. He closed his eyes, and when he spoke, his voice was clear and strong, the ancient, melodic syllables of the Cherokee language flowing into the microphone. "Listen to me. This is a messenger from the 177th. The men you call the Lost are in the valley of the Charlevoix stream. The iron arrows from our own bows are falling on our heads. You must make them stop. Then, you must shoot your iron arrows at the ridges to the north and west, where the gray coats are thick as summer flies. Our strength is 500 men. We are holding, but we are in the bear's mouth. Do you understand?" There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. Then, a confused, but alert voice responded in English. "Say again? I didn't copy that. What language is that?" "Over." Captain Johnson grabbed the microphone. "Post 7, do not question. Just listen and record every word that man says. Translate it later. His message is for Division HQ. It is the highest priority. Do you understand?" "Over." "Roger, roger that, sir. We're recording. Go ahead." Charlie repeated the message, slower this time, putting all the urgency he felt into the beautiful, incomprehensible words. He was using the language of his ancestors as a weapon, a code the German eavesdroppers could never break. It was a shield, protecting the lives of 500 men. When he finished, he slumped back, the headset slipping from his fingers. The effort had drained the last of his strength. He had done all he could. He had gotten the message through. He had given them the enemy's position. He had spoken in a tongue the forest had never heard. Now, all they could do was wait, and hope that the voice of the Cherokee, carried on a crackling wire through the hell of the Argonne, would be heard. The wait was an agony worse than any wound. Back in the medical tent, time seemed to stretch and warp. Every minute felt like an hour. Every distant rumble of artillery a potential death knell for the men he'd left behind. Charlie's body was racked with a fever, a reaction to the exhaustion, the cold of the river, and the searing pain in his leg. But his mind was crystal clear, trapped in a cycle of desperate hope and gnawing fear. Had they understood? Had the message gotten through? Had the Cherokee words, so foreign to the ears on the other end of the line, been translated correctly? He pictured some young, bewildered signal officer in a dugout, scratching his head over the strange, melodic language, trying to find someone, anyone, who could make sense of it. He drifted in and out of a fitful sleep, his dreams a chaotic mix of the Argonne's shadows and the sunny, open fields of Oklahoma. He saw the faces of the men in the ravine, the tough kid from Brooklyn, the older fellow who always talked about his bakery, Major Whittlesey with his steady, weary gaze. Then it happened. First, there was a change in the sound. The constant, thunderous background noise of the artillery, which had been a part of their lives for weeks, suddenly stopped. It wasn't a pause. It was a cessation, a profound, deafening silence that fell over the entire front. It was more startling than any explosion. Charlie's eyes snapped open. He saw the medic look up, his hands frozen in the act of rolling a bandage. The wounded men in the other cots grew still, listening. The silence lasted for perhaps a full minute, a hell breath across the battlefield. And then, a new sound began. It started as a distant, whispering sigh, like a great wind gathering far, far away. It grew swiftly into a terrifying, rising scream that tore through the sky high above them. It was the sound of countless shells, but these were not falling short. These were passing over them, flying towards the German lines. The American artillery had finally, blessedly, found its range. The ground began to tremble as the shells found their marks. A continuous, rolling thunder erupted from the north and west, precisely the directions Charlie had described in his message. The ridges where the gray coats were thick as summer flies were now being transformed into a hellish landscape of fire and earth. The very air in the medical tent vibrated with the concussive force of the barrage. It was the most beautiful, most terrible sound Charlie had ever heard. It was the sound of salvation. A cheer went up from the American trenches outside, a raw, joyous roar that cut through the symphony of destruction. They knew what it meant. The lost battalion had been found. Captain Johnson burst into the tent, his face alight with a triumphant grin. He strode over to Charlie's cot and clasped his shoulder, his grip firm and full of emotion. "You did it, son. You did it," he shouted over the roar. They understood. The message got through. That barrage is for them. That's their ticket out. Tears, hot and unbidden, welled in Charlie's eyes and streamed down his grimy cheeks. He didn't try to stop them. It was a release of all the tension, the fear, the sheer, impossible weight he had carried through the German lines. The relief was so immense it was a physical pain in his chest. The barrage continued for what felt like an eternity, a relentless, hammering rain of steel upon the German positions. When it finally began to taper off, it was replaced by the sound of small arms fire and new, determined battle cries. The American infantry was going over the top, launching the rescue mission that the barrage had made possible. Later that day, the first ragged, emaciated survivors of the lost battalion began to stumble into the American lines. They were hollow-eyed specters, caked in mud and blood, but they were alive. They spoke of the hellish 5 days, of the moment the American shells had stopped falling on them and started crashing down on the Germans, of the miraculous relief that had followed. And they all asked the same question. The runner? The Cherokee kid? Did he make it? Word spread through the ranks like wildfire. The story of the quiet private from Oklahoma who had slipped through an entire German army, destroyed a command post, crossed a deadly river, and then sent a message in a secret, ancient language to save them. It was a legend being born in real time. A week later, Charlie was on a stretcher, being loaded onto a truck bound for a proper hospital far behind the lines. His leg was healing, but the doctors insisted he needed rest. As he was being carried past a column of fresh troops marching towards the front, a grizzled sergeant major spotted him. The sergeant major called the column to a halt. He walked over to Charlie's stretcher, looked down at the young, tired face, and then snapped a perfect, crisp salute. The entire column of soldiers, seeing this, followed suit, honoring the lone soldier who had saved 500 of their brothers. Charlie, overwhelmed, could only manage a weak nod. As the truck pulled away, bouncing along the rutted road away from the thunder of the Argonne, Charlie closed his eyes. He wasn't thinking of medals or glory. He was thinking of the feel of the earth under his feet, the whisper of the wind in the trees, the flow of the river that had tried to claim him, and the sound of his own language, becoming, for one critical moment, the most powerful weapon on the battlefield. He had gone into the forest a soldier, but he had used the heart of a hunter and the soul of his people, and he had brought them home. The end.